So we're talking about mudita, right? Translated as appreciative joy, the experience of being able to delight in the good fortune of others. Well, that sounds really lovely. And I love when I can do that. It feels really good. I also know how challenging sometimes that can be. I've seen more than one teacher describe mudita as being perhaps the most challenging of the 4 Brahma Viharas to cultivate. And judging from my own experiences, I'm not surprised by that. Because here's a quality that I have a very strong aspiration and desire to have. I want to be joyful. I want to be joyful within my own experience, my own capacity to experience joys, to take them in. And I want to be the kind of person that delights in your joys. Very much so. And I think that's true for all of us. This is not a desire that we have to spend a long time developing a want for. And then there are so many challenges that can arise. So I'd like to spend a little bit of time today talking about that and exploring that together. Teacher Sylvia Borstein says, I've heard her say this many times, the whole of the Dharma can be summarized simply as pay attention and be kind. She says, life is so difficult. How can we be anything but kind? And every time she says it, I feel like saying, it's true, life is difficult. How can we be anything but kind? And yet, I can be. I can be sometimes something other than kind. And I'm not referring to the kind of unkindness of malicious action, intentional cruelty. That's not what we're going to talk about. I don't think that's what we need to talk about. We're good people. I'm good people. But the heart to open sometimes and remain open, it just seems much easier and much more sort of effortless for me when it's in the face of somebody else's sorrow or pain or challenge or loss or difficulty. It feels like I don't have to work so hard to cultivate a caring heart in that space, in that moment. It's effortless, it's automatic, it's natural. I'm a good-hearted person and I'm deeply invested. Heck, I make my living caring for people. You know, that comes from something authentic in me. And my mind says, yeah, that's equally true in the face of other people's good fortune. But there are people that I find challenging, that I find difficult in the face of their good fortune to rejoice. That seems sometimes not so much in my head, but in my heart, to be just a bit over the top. Now, there is the near and the far enemy of each of these Brahma Viharas, and we've spent time discussing each one. And there's what's known as the near enemy of this Brahma Vihara of mudita, which is like exuberance, an over-the-top kind of a feeling of excitement. I like to see it, I like to understand it as joy without equanimity, joy that isn't grounded. And generally speaking, I think I'm a fairly grounded kind of person. I'm not that concerned with getting over exuberant. I don't feel like I'm that at risk for that. But the far enemy of mudita sometimes feels like a companion. And I wish it wasn't. I don't like it. I don't want it. And the challenge, not for people that I naturally like and care about deeply, but for people that don't quite fit into that category for whatever the reasons are. And there can be more than one reason. Can my heart really flutter, be moved in the way that it does when I'm experiencing my own good fortune or somebody very dear to me? Yeah, that's a real challenge. Pema Chodron writes, the near enemy of joyfulness is overexcitement. Because authentic joy is not in a euphoric state or a feeling of being high. Rather, it's a state of appreciation that allows us to participate fully in our own lives. We train in rejoicing in the good fortune of self and others. And the far enemy of joy is envy. And she says, until I started working with the practice of rejoicing in the good fortune of others, I never realized I could be so envious. To say that this was humbling is an understatement. When you begin this practice of rejoicing in other people's good fortune, she writes, you can expect to encounter your soft spot, as well as your competitiveness and envy. Until I began to practice rejoicing, I wasn't aware of how much envy I had. Who would have thought that the practice of rejoicing would be a setup for seeing our neurosis? Because our intention is to wake up so we can help others do the same, we rejoice as much in seeing where we're stuck as we rejoice in our loving kindness. We rejoice as much in seeing where we're stuck. So this points to a way forward for me, right? I am stuck. I can get stuck. I will get stuck. And practicing mudita in certain circumstances, being able to really not just think what I should be feeling, but really feeling it, I'm going to encounter some stuckness there in certain circumstances and with certain people. Not if, when, I will. And being able to perhaps rejoice in seeing my stuckness is where the practice of mudita is for me then. Okay, I could work with that. That sounds like someplace that, I can actually meet. So why is this? Why can we struggle with what's known as these far enemies of mudita? Okay? And the truth is, it isn't just me. I think most of us, if not all of us, can relate in different ways and times when we weren't really able to fully experience the happiness or the success of somebody else, whether it's a family member or a colleague or a neighbor. But maybe we're already somehow feeling like we're missing out on life or in something in life. So when somebody else has some good news, maybe we reflexively compare ourselves to them and we feel envious, regardless of how sincere our intentions are. And oftentimes our feelings are based on the belief, not a rational belief, that there's like only a limited amount of happiness to go around. So when something good happens to somebody else, maybe there's less left for me. And like I said, this is completely not rational. And yet, it's pretty persistent. It's pretty consistent. This can show itself up. And I just came back from a meditation retreat. And even here in our practice together online, how many times have I stolen a glance at everybody sitting in the meditation hall with me? And maybe with more than just a little twinge of envy said to myself, my gosh, look how much stillness and concentration they all seem to be having. And where the heck is mine? What's wrong with me? Why can't I have that? I want that. Maybe once in a while, as we're sitting in our practice together, we steal a glance at the screen and marvel at some of the other folks on screen, seemingly so deep in their practice, so successfully working it. Yeah? Greed, one of the far enemies of mudita, right? It doesn't just have the desire to have more than others, but it also has this additional flavor of us insisting that we have the exclusive right to these desirable qualities, or to these achievements, or to these possessions. And the greed winds up breeding a sense of guardedness and even potentially suspiciousness and vigilance. We become a bit Scrooge-like in our heart. And then envy, one of the other common far enemies of mudita, right? Envy gets in the way of our ability to be happy with other people's good fortune. And we can't really even endure, we can't even tolerate other people's happiness in the face of envy. This reflects in those moments when we're experiencing envy, not just the mentality of scarcity, of not enoughness, but also some element of not really believing in ourselves. We wind up constantly perseverating, ruminating on all the things that we don't have, which erodes our happiness even further, and ultimately could lead to other behaviors that are harmful. Sharon Salzberg writes about some of the other lesser known far enemies of mudita, of kindness and joy. And she describes the dangers and what happens when we're being judgmental and when we're demeaning others, or the comparing mind, when we're comparing ourselves to others. There's this old Chinese saying, write your sorrows in sand and etch your joys in stone. And it feels to me like the practice is to first work on unetching my sorrows that are already sometimes etched in stone and turning that somehow into sand, and then working on etching the joys into stone, right? Some of our sorrows, some of our narratives, our built-in resentments, our built-in not enoughnesses can feel like they're etched in stone already. Yeah. But when I read that from Pema Chodron, the rejoicing in the ability to see this, I felt that was really helpful. But there's a way for me to anchor my practice of mudita, that when there are times and when there are situations where the heart isn't really available for the joy in the delight of the good fortune of this person or in this circumstance, I can really truly appreciate that I can see this. And that perhaps my practice has gotten me to the point where I can even see this with a much lighter touch of judgment or condemnation or shame. Like, oh, how wonderful. This is true insight. This is genuine insight. And that I have the capacity and I have the heartfulness to want to see this for myself, to be interested in seeing this, even though it's not pleasant or easy. This is something that I can and I do take comfort in for myself. So I hope tomorrow when I share some thoughts to share a bit more about ways to practice, other doorways in, other gateways in for this practice. But let me end for today with sharing the following poem. And I posted it in the chat for everybody to see. You could look that up later for yourself. For when I didn't fully live each moment or deeply relish my precious time. For when I didn't seize the day or respond till life is passing by. For when I didn't dare to dream or let potential maximize. For when I didn't come out and risk, but stayed inside and hid. For when I didn't see the meaning or get the lesson in each teaching. For all my didn'ts are held in love, just as much as all my dids. For all my didn'ts are held in love, just as much as all my dids. Yeah.